The German officer is undressing the woman, preparing to have sex with her. But the brown hair under the blonde raises his suspicion whether she is a Jew, whether the beautiful undercover woman can evade the suspicious officer to carry out her revenge. The movie begins with people getting off the service car for a tour. In the classroom, children sing songs with their teacher, and a lady takes a photo of the whole class. The school teacher, Rachel, rolls down the blinds on the door. However, the girl taking the photo is Ronnie, a friend of Hague during World War II, on a collective farm in Israel in 1956. Rachel asks Ronnie why she is in school, and Ronnie says she is here because of her husband's religious trip. Before long, Ronnie leaves because they were only given a few minutes for a quick tour of the school. After Ronnie leaves, Rachel ponders her experiences in the last few days of the war in 1944. In 1944, Rachel hides from the Nazis on a farm in the Dutch countryside. They hope to exchange her hiding place for learning Bible verses. At the dining table, Rachel is asked to lead the pre-dinner prayer because her boss thinks she already knows a lot of Jewish words. A young man named Rob from a nearby farm is boating, and when he sees Rachel, he shouts at her in English that music is forbidden, except for naked girls like her. The man's yelling scares Rachel because she thinks he's a crock. As Rachel prepares to get on the boat, they hear the screeches of a jet plane, and the jet releases a bomb on the house near where they are, and where Rachel lives. Everyone in the farmhouse was killed in the explosion except Rachel. After the explosion, Rob hides her in the greenhouse owned by this family. They prepare food while listening to music. When he hears Rachel singing, Rob is surprised. The voice sounds like a girl singing on a record. He then determines that it's Rachel, and Rachel confirms it, saying it's a song she sang in the good times before the war. While they are cooking, they hear the sound of a car engine, so they quickly hide. Coincidentally, the police arrive. Rachel and Rob would not have come out, but because of the police's intrigue warning, they show themselves and ask what the police's words mean. Police officer Van Geen comes to see them, and warns them that Rachel is nearby, and the Nazis are looking for her. Soon the SD will come to arrest her and transport her to Poland, because they might go to jail for helping Jews. Rachel then asks how this information reached Officer Van Geen, and Van Geen replies that the police's report on the Germans fell into the hands of the Hague police. He agrees to help Rachel and Rob flee to the southern Dutch area under Allied control. After the police leave, Rachel chases him for help. The police provide a secret route to escape through Biesbosch. Rob hesitates whether to accept this help, because it's too risky. But Van Geen gives them a choice, either to go with him, or to take care of themselves. Rachel says they will come, so Van gives them a time frame to prepare before they come to pick them up the next day. First, Rachel goes to see Miss Smaal, her father's lawyer. He gives her enough cash and jewelry to sustain her for a year, but he also warns her not to trust others too much. Van Geen takes Rob and Rachel to a port where Jews are waiting to depart. Rachel reunites with her parents and siblings after her brother has an emergency appendectomy. Van Geen doesn't board the ship with the Jews. That night, a Nazi patrol boat ambushed the ship, and only Rachel escaped the bloodbath after the Nazis opened fire. She observes the Nazis stealing from the dead as she drifts downstream. Rachel is discovered by members of the resistance, who disguise her as a typhoid patient and put her in a well-sealed coffin with a large air gap, secretly sending her into the Hague. She is given a new name, Ellis de Vries, and sent to a soup house run by another resistance member, Gerben Kuipers. She eventually participates in the resistance's operation to smuggle British weapons and food. Hans Ackermans is a skilled marksman, in charge of the smuggler's work. To avoid the Nazis searching for weapons in their train luggage, he and Ellis have to pretend to be husband and wife. However, when the Nazi soldiers on the train are apparently really going to search all the luggage, a new strategy is needed. Ellis picks up the luggage and goes into private space. SD Ludwig Müntze is sitting there. Münze's compartment is not searched by the Nazis. Müntze, evidently attracted to each other, accepts Ellis's invitation to work with him. Hans is clearly envious. A truck carrying British weapons has an accident in front of the soup house. Kuiper's son Tim Kuipers is stopped by the Gestapo while driving. Ellis arranges a meeting with Müntze, hoping she can persuade him to release Tim, while others hide. She brings him some rare Dutch stamps, because she knows he loves collecting stamps. She receives his invitation to attend a Nazi party. When she sees SS leader Gunter Franken there, she recognizes him as the Nazi who organized the attack on the refugee ship. She is very scared when she sees him, but she still manages to sing at the celebration. After returning to his suite, she and Müntze make love. He falls in love with her, although he suspects she is Jewish because of her blonde hair. She agrees to work in his office and starts work the next day. There she meets Ronnie, Franken's assistant and bedmate. Franken tells them that Tim has admitted all charges and will be sentenced to death. However, Müntze refuses to sign the death sentence. If the resistance stops attacking the Nazis will stop their violent retaliation against Dutch citizens. According to the ceasefire agreement arranged by Smaal and Müntze, Ellis meets Smaal at Nazi headquarters and gets this information from him. However, when a secret microphone installed by Ellis in Franken's office shows that Franken and Van Geen have been cooperating in killing and robbing Jews trying to escape to Allied territory, a dispute arises among the resistance fighters. Van Geen asks Franken how he knows where the Jews are hiding, but Franken refuses to answer. Ellis seeks revenge for her family, but Kuipers is unwilling to risk breaking the ceasefire agreement because he fears his son will be murdered. When he is questioned whether the lives of Jews are more important than the lives of the Dutch, he shows a degree of anti-Semitism. Hans and several others decide to make it look like Kuiper has fled to hiding for his own protection, behind his back. Van Geen tried to be drugged by Hans with chloroform. However, due to the expiry of the drug, this drug is no longer practical. They are forced to kill Van Geen and throw his body into the canal, because he nearly escaped. The next night, Müntze questions Ellis about her relationship with the resistance. Smaal gets a blueprint of the Nazi headquarters from a friend at City Hall, which used to be a bank. They devise a strategy to enter the place unnoticed during the party, celebrating Hitler's birthday. Müntze uses the information Ellis gave him to accuse Franken of the crime of keeping goods confiscated from Jews. When nothing was found in the search of Franken's safe, Franken accused him of bargaining with the resistance, a group of terrorists. For months, Franken declares that after Müntze is sentenced to death, 40 hostages will be executed in retaliation for the murder of Van Geen. Ellis urges Müntze to be one of the released because she has fallen in love with him, although the current rescue operation will be more difficult. She invites Hans and others to go down the coal kiln first that night, and then sing at the banquet. After the resistance members enter the structure, many prisoners are released. However, they are ambushed by the Nazi forces. Hans and just another member of the resistance are still alive. Franken takes Ellis to his office, where he uses the secret microphone he knows, making it seem like Ellis has been cooperating with him all along, undermining the resistance. Kuipers promises to come to kill her. However, Franken already made this decision. That night, when another sympathetic soldier rescues Ellis and Müntze from the cell, Ronnie uses her body to divert attention. A few days later, World War II in Europe ends with Germany's surrender. Returning to The Hague, Ellis and Müntze travel. They visit Smaal, as they believe he's the one who informed Franken about the situation with Jews and resistance soldiers. He objects to this, claiming he has evidence of the actual criminals, which he plans to submit to the Canadian military authorities in charge of the city. But before he can, Smaal and his wife are killed by an unidentified assassin. Even though Ellis takes Smaal's notebook, resistance fighters still capture Müntze and her. Franken, with the stolen Jewish goods, tries to escape by boat, but is shot dead by Hans. Müntze's former commander, General Courtenard, argues to his Canadian counterparts that Nazi officers still retain the right to punish their own officers for improper behavior, and sentences Müntze to death when he falls into Canadian hands. Müntze is sentenced to death for his association with communists in the resistance movement. Ellis, along with other Dutch suspected of collaborating with the Nazis, is placed in an enclosure. Other locals are very hostile to her and her companions. But Hans intervenes and reprimands his compatriots for acting like Nazi occupiers during the war. Hans finds Ellis and brings her to his office, where he is now revered as a resistance hero. They distribute chocolate bars to children on the street. He shows her the money and valuables he took from Franken's office, and tells her that Müntze has been executed. Ellis immediately bursts into tears. Hans claims to be giving her a sedative injection, but instead gives her a lethal dose of insulin. He's a traitor for the resistance, believing he must kill Ellis to clear his name. As he walks to the window to accept applause from the crowd, Ellis eats a piece of chocolate to counteract the insulin and escapes with Smaal's black book. She gives the evidence to Kuipers in nearby Massachusetts, where his son's body recently discovered. They set off to find Hans, trying to escape the city with the Jews' loot. Using the same strategy to get Rachel into the resistance, they find him on a country road with a coffin with a shielding hole. Kuipers and Ellis cut off his air supply, suffocating him to death, even though he is willing to give them some money. They discuss how to use the money by the river. The film ends in 1956, at the Stein collective farm built with Jewish money, when armed Israeli soldiers arrive to guard against unknown enemies, and Rachel and her family disappear behind the fence, signaling the start of the Suez crisis. If you enjoy this video, please give a like and subscribe our channel. Thanks for watching.